Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, and philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about the most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. I am really excited to bring on our special guest, Scott Harrison, the founder of charitywater and author of Thirst. He has just a marvelous journey that is really inspiring. I first heard him on Cody Foster's podcast, and when I heard him, I was like, we have to have him on here to share his story, the origin story of charitywater, as well as his personal story. So, Scott, you're a masterful storyteller. What habits did you nurture and really to become this great communicator that you are?
I think it's always come naturally to me. I loved reading growing up. I was not allowed, I think, more than an hour or two of TV a week. So my imagination ran wild in books, and I wanted to be a writer. And when I was in high school, I was writing for the local paper. And I just loved story. Did a brief stint at New York University in film school. At one point thought I wanted to be a director and tell stories using that medium. But I think it's just come naturally to me. I think in stories and I speak in stories. And that's turned out to be very
You do
useful
a marvelous
over
job.
the last 16 years of building charitywater.
Well, I want to ask you, how did you foster, though, this creativeness to nonprofits, the marketing that you have for your nonprofit charitywater, I would say would go just to equal like an Apple, a for-profit company, the marketing that you've done. I love the idea of giving away your birthday to charity.
Yeah.
I think that is just a really cool idea.
Well, my background probably had a little to do with it. I was a club promoter for 10 years in New York City. I'd rebelled against a very conservative Christian upbringing, went the other way and filled up 40 different nightclubs over a decade, full of, rich, famous people who wanted to drink and party the night away. And to be successful at that, we needed to tell a story that whichever club we were at, whichever club we were inviting people to that night, was better than any other club on the island of Manhattan. And, there was a velvet rope outside and we would turn away more people than we would let in, sometimes. And it was really telling a story that this was the place to be. There was also creativity involved as we would put together DJs and events. And I remember once throwing a pool party inside a nightclub, and there were hundreds of beach balls, and I paid someone to sit on a lifeguard stand and blow a whistle, and there was kind of this sense of adventure in the night that was just such a part of my life. If you were boring, nobody came to your club, nobody spent money, and you didn't make any money. So when I pivoted at 28 years old and went to live in Liberia as a photojournalist for a couple of years, I think coming off of that experience and starting charitywater, I was 30 at the time. I just knew that creative, imaginative, inspiring marketing could also apply to a mission like ending the global water crisis, a mission like bringing clean water to every single person alive. I love that you mentioned Apple. For many years, we were referred to as the Apple of charities, and we liked that. We would hire designers away from, the Adobes of the world and the Twitters and we weren't hiring them from other nonprofits. We were hiring them from big ad agencies. So we cared so much about the brand. charitywater was going to be a brand. For us to raise the billions and billions of dollars that we would need to raise to make a true sizable impact in this paralyzing global catastrophe, right? 10% of the world right now drinking dirty, disgusting water, 771 million people. So 2 United States worth of people drinking dirty water. For us to raise the capital needed, we would need to build an epic, imaginative, hope-filled, and inspiring brand.
I really want every listener to hear the origin story of Charity Water. And I know it's a long story, but I want to hear the story because at one point you mentioned that you were flashing a Rolex and paid to drink certain alcohol. And your life completely flipped from trying to, promote alcohol to promote water. And the other thing that also moved me with your story is how you got so you even mentioned mad and I think this is so important because it wasn't a cause. It was your because. I mean, it changed from just a cause to my because I have to make this my
Yeah.
mission fix. So if you will take everyone through that story, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, when I was 4 years old, my mom almost died. There was a carbon monoxide gas leak in the home we just moved into. On New Year's Day, 1980, she walks across the bedroom and she crumples to the floor unconscious. So mom was the canary in the coal mine, the first one in the family to go down. And this led to a lot of blood tests and a discovery of massive amounts of carbon monoxide in her bloodstream. This then led to the discovery of the gas leak in our home, and the faulty furnace was ripped out before it was able to do any more damage to my father and I. Um, we were really only sleeping in the house, and mom was doing 24/7 unpacking boxes and putting the house together. So she got about double, if not more, exposure than we did. So that led to a really bizarre childhood with a mom wearing masks connected to oxygen tanks, living in tinfoil covered rooms, sleeping on army cots that had been washed with baking soda 20 times to get any sort of chemical or smell out of it. And I was an only child in a caregiver role. So I did the cooking, I did the cleaning, I helped take care of my mom. There was a huge amount of responsibility that went along with my childhood. And my parents were, authentic, I guess you would say non-denominational Christians. They believed that there was a reason for this sickness and that God would get my mom and our family through. So I was raised in the church. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I didn't sleep around. I didn't curse. And then 18. So unfortunately, I live out this obnoxiously banal and cliche prodigal son story. And I moved to New York City and I start smoking and I start drinking and I start sleeping around and I start swearing and I become a club promoter. And I spend the next 10 years of my life chasing supermodels around the world and driving a BMW and flashing a stupid, watch and flying in other people's private planes and, thinking that I'm the man because thousands of people come slip past my velvet rope and then revel as I stand in the DJ booth, spraying Cristal over people. So it was a very vapid, sycophantic, really degenerate life once you peel back, the veneer of it. And after 10 years, really exploring the opposite of the morality and the spirituality that I've been brought up with, I woke up one day, I started having some health issues, maybe no surprise. And I said, look, I'm emotionally bankrupt. I'm spiritually bankrupt. I'm morally bankrupt. If I die today, the only thing you could write on my tombstone is, here lies a man who's gotten a million people wasted. And I didn't want that on my tombstone. So, 28, this led to a kind of 6-month re-exploration of faith and started praying again and reading the Bible again and trying to shed the vices. And it led me to a pretty cold turkey moment where I smoked my last cigarette and did my last line of cocaine and, looked at my last pornographic image. And at 28, I completely changed my life and said, I'm going to make it look exactly opposite. And I sold everything I owned at that moment, started life over, and I went to serve in the poorest country in the world, which was post-war Liberia, West Africa at that time. And I picked up a camera and said, I could take pretty good pictures. I'm a pretty good writer. And I tried to be useful to this medical operation, helping them raise awareness and funding for their work. And that was 2 years of that journey. I lived in leprosy colonies. I was living in a country where there was no electricity and no running water and no sewage system. There was no mail throughout the country. And there was one doctor for every 50,000 people. So here's how I came to water. I learned that half of the disease in the country was simply because people were drinking disgusting water. And half the people in the country didn't have clean water to drink. So 50% of the population was drinking dirty water, and 50% of the hospital beds were full with people who were drinking dirty water and didn't have access to sanitation and hygiene. So it was at the end of that 2 years that, yeah, you're right, it made me angry. Here I was selling $10 bottles of Voss water to, millionaires and billionaire bankers who wouldn't even open the water in my clubs. And I'm literally watching children die when they're drinking from brown, viscous swamps. I'm learning that women are getting raped in the bush as they're walking 8 hours to get water for their children that they know might kill them any day. So, yeah, it was kind of, I heard a pastor once say, holy discontent. I was like, this is not okay on my watch. It's not okay. The 10% of the planet lives without the most basic need in life. And I'm 30 years old. I'm going to go back to New York. I'm going to try and see if I can use the rest of my life to bring everybody on planet Earth clean water. That's the short version of the story.
It's a beautiful story. I mean, what a mission to say, hey, I'm going to be the end of this. I'm going to set myself as my life is going to be the end of dirty water. And I think it's just amazing. But I did want to go back to how you made a 180-degree change in your life. I mean, that's true definition of repentance.
Yeah.
Turn 180, go the other way. What I talk about here on the show all the time is a lot of people, sadly, are average givers. They maybe have a high income, they have a high net worth, they're working really hard, they're very ambitious. But the average American spends 92% of their money on themselves. They invest maybe 6%. And then if they give at all, they only give 2%. So my question to you would be, some would say that you should just make incremental changes to your giving, your tithing, just a little bit, just don't be too uncomfortable. But I feel like sometimes making a radical change in your life can be more beneficial. What's your opinion after going through that yourself?
Well, listen, you're talking to an Enneagram 8. I'm like the most extreme person that I know. I mean, I just came off a 7-day fast, and I decided to only drink water for 7 days because if you're going to do it, what's the point of drinking juice or broth, right? I mean, let's go all in. So, for me, I love the idea of radical generosity, maybe over incremental generosity. Just one example, I had the fortune of writing a book, and at the thought, it was my life story and my experience with Charity Water, and I was going to keep the money. This is my kids' college fund. I've lived this life, and I'm going to be writing this book. And just in one moment, really, my wife and I decided let's give away 100% of the advance and all the future profits. Domestically and globally. It was $750,000. And we never regretted that. But that's a lot more interesting to me, to be able to say, I'll never make a penny from thirst. I'll never make a penny from the audiobook or the actual book or the book in Korean or the book in Romanian. All of that goes to support the mission. Now, would 10 or 20% of profits going back to the organization probably have been acceptable for, everybody? Sure. But, it was a lot more fun just to take something and say, that's not mine. And, by doing so, I was able to be $1 million donor to my own organization.
That's really neat. I do want to point out that's the use of the prodigal period of your life that you named it. Despite turning 180 degrees from God initially, you were still being prepared in some ways to learn how to promote events. I wanted to go full circle. You learned marketing from promoting the events, but today a completely different type of event you're promoting through global change. What would you say to the giver that's on the fence that at this point isn't volunteering or isn't giving, because they'd feel like if they change, they'd make a change, they'd feel like a fraud. Did that ever happen to you?
Not really. I committed so deeply, with my time and my talent and my money that I value authenticity, even over over so many things. Integrity and authenticity are very highly held values for me. So no, it would have felt like a fraud if I was doing one thing, or saying one thing and doing another. But that's not how, I chose to live my life after the turn. Certainly before, I mean, I probably felt like more of a fraud, running around pretending to be rich and, famous and rich, young, and powerful by spraying Cristal champagne over people who were, much more interesting and much more wealthy and much more accomplished than I was, from some DJ booth. But
I love that you mentioned that, and that's why I named it "Rich, Young, and Powerful." A lot of people don't know this, but it's a play off the rich young ruler. If you look at the rich young ruler, he is the success story. He's that. If this was a drama, a movie, he's going off into the sunset with all of his money. He's come to Jesus asking for eternal life, and luckily he walks away with all of his money intact, even though Jesus asked him to sell everything, but he walks away a success story of monetarily. But he's bankrupt, like you said, spiritually bankrupt, does not have eternal life, and walks away sad, and becomes a lesson in it that, yeah, actually, Jesus was asking him to make a trade. Will you trade your earthly treasures for lasting eternal treasures? And I love that again, this prodigal period in your life is you could have just continued in that self deprivation of living that life of Cristal, but you said, hey, I'm putting away all of that, and I'm going after something greater, something that's going to make bigger impacts for the world, make a dent in the universe, make a dent, hopefully, for the kingdom.
yep, I totally agree. I think, you talked a little bit about, giving earlier, how people should approach it. I think the more you give, the more you give. I think it's like a muscle. And when you work out the muscle, it gets stronger. And, I remember a pastor friend of mine once, was giving to us. And I said, what are the things do you care about? And, he was giving to like 50 different things. And, for a lot of people, oh, that's not part of my strategy. I have a very narrow and well thought out giving strategy. And, we're focused on, childhood education here in our state, or, women's health issues in Malawi, or whatever. Like, a lot of people have narrow ideas that are well researched. And, I said, well, why do you give to so many things? He said, well, it's great. I get to live vicariously through all of these great leaders doing all of this great redemptive work in the world. He had this portfolio of interesting, world-changing efforts that he felt connected to. And I just remember thinking, like, what a cool way to think about it. You could support your local soup kitchen and inspire a great team in your small town doing that. You could support a global water organization like ours, making an impact in 29 different countries. You could support, a new projector at your kid's school, right? To help the science teacher. I mean, I think it's about saying yes, saying we have resources. How can we use our resources to be a blessing to others, both here, abroad? It could be paying for somebody's lunch. It could be standing in line at the Costco and looking at another family and just saying, I'm just going to walk over and swipe my card and take care of that family because they look like they could use some help. So I think, I love the idea that for some people, for some of my favorite givers in the charity water community, giving has almost become like a contagion that has taken them over, and they just love to give. They love to give more than they love to keep or to count, portfolio returns or dollars and cents.
In my book, The Giving Crisis, I talk about how we need a new giving generation, how that during the Great Depression, we were actually more generous per person, per capita, with the adjusted for inflation, we're still more generous back during the Great Depression than we are during the great economic expansion that we've seen over the last decade. But I'm really curious about recruiting this new giving generation and changing that for Generation Z, for millennials. How do we teach a new generation to be generation? Because you've done such a great job of recruiting young people to give away their birthday and give sacrificially.
I think storytelling. We tell stories that move people to action, and it's action beyond signing a petition. It's action that involves them maybe giving of their time if the organization achieves its mission through volunteering, or giving of their hard-earned money to bless others who have been far less fortunate. And I think what I've loved, I'm at this 16 years now. We've raised over $700 million, and we have this unbelievable community around the world of givers. But what I love about, water is it's just so simple. I mean, if it's water or food or shelter, I mean, these are basic needs. These are inarguable common goods. Whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or an atheist, whether you're Republican or a Democrat or an independent or libertarian, like everybody can get behind clean water for humans. Everybody can get behind the idea that no one should go to bed hungry, not knowing where their next meal should come from. No one should go to bed, sitting in mud while the roof leaks and they huddle together in a corner with their children trying to stay warm. So there are all of these things that people can get involved in, all of these things where you can take your money that could sit on a balance sheet or could buy, a far nicer car maybe than you need, and they could end needless human suffering. And I would encourage people to go out and look for those opportunities in their local communities and in the global community.
I think that's fabulous. And I want to learn more about how we can get, tangible with Charity Water. How can we get involved? How can we pray? How can we give?
As far as giving, there are really three ways. We are an organization where 100% of all donations go directly to fund water projects across 29 countries. So we operate with a 2-bank account model. The water bank account, where millions of givers have given, and it's a pure, if they give $1 or $1 million, every penny goes to the field. And then the overhead bank account, where we have 131 families who support all of the staff, all the infrastructure, all the systems and the computers and the insurances that makes Charity Water run. So that's kind of the first. We have these 131 families. The second is just, we have a lot of people who sponsor one project a year, and it costs only $10,000 to give an entire community clean water. My wife and I do at least one every single year. And just knowing that, I can write a $10,000 check and 300 human beings in a community that didn't have clean water are going to get clean water. And then 100% of that goes straight to the field. And then the third is, we have an amazing community of people who show up for $30 or $40 a month. There are our spring members, and they give a little bit every single month. It's kind of like drip, 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 and that has added up to a huge amount of impact. And that spring community has now grown to people now across 149 countries around the world, who some can give 30 a month, some can give 40, some can give 100, some can give 5. But they show up each and every month for clean water. And of course, please, if you're so inclined, we would love prayer for the mission. We've just crossed through 16 million people with access to clean water, but there's 770 million people who are waiting for us right now. So we have done 1/50th of the work that needs to be done. We are 2% of the way to calling this mission accomplished. And we really believe that this day exists. I believe in heaven. Kids are not drinking dirty water. Women are not walking 8 hours to a swamp or a river at risk of rape or attack. Everybody has access to clean water. So we're trying to make that possible here on Earth.
I think it's just marvelous, the pioneering of some of the things that you've done, like the spring, like putting GPS tags for where the actual giving is going. I think that's great. I also think the two balance sheet system that I think you're a forerunner for. I think all of these are just a testament to how hard you've worked and just been creative and well delivered and just used the stories to communicate such a big problem in the world.
Well, thanks. We have an amazing team, and they're constantly looking for new creative ways to build an energetic, hyper transparent organization that can just most effectively turn donations into clean water. I mean, that is really in a sustainable way. So that's as simple as it is. We're trying to take money and deliver clean water to people and make sure that clean water is flowing for years and years to come, impacting future generations. So it's a lot of fun being on this mission now for 16 years.
Scott, if you had the chance for everybody, I'm talking the whole world, to read this one tweet, what would you want the world to hear? What would you want them to read?
There's kind of two. One for business that is an actual tweet that I saw. This is years ago. Was things take time, and then he's now a friend. The guy who tweeted it was a 27-year stock chart of Amazon. And he showed the first 20 years, only 7% of the value was created by Jeff Bezos and team in 20 years. And then 93% of value was created in years 21 through 27. And, I would hope Charity Water's graph might look like that. The 16 million people that we've helped now, if we continue to stay focused, stay transparent, stay effective, and continue to tell the story and invite more and more people to be a part of this movement, that the best is yet to come ahead. As far as kind of, on a more personal level, I saw one once that just kind of said something along the lines of, far more important than what you do or what you accomplish is how you do it. Really, character is everything, and integrity is everything. So, I try to make sure that the numbers are great and the impact is great, but are we operating the organization with an impeccable amount of integrity at every aspect of the organization? And that is more important at our core than the results we're getting.
That's so critical, so important. What are some common misconceptions people have about you, they have about Charity Water, that you'd like to clear up?
Well, one of my favorites is every once in a while I'll get asked, so what else do you do? Do you do this part time? I'm like, yeah, I run $100 million a year organization part time. Yep, that's what I do. Actually, I work, I work down at the bank. Actually, my like, it's an extraordinary amount of work. I was on 78 flights last year, and that was a down year. That's down from sometimes close to 100 every single year. It's an extraordinary amount of effort and energy required to continue growing something at scale. And of course, the payoff for us is, last year, 2 million new people got clean water that did not have them on January 1 the year before. And, I lived in Manhattan for 26 years. That's 50 of my local stadium filled up, 50 Madison Square Gardens at full capacity, and now have clean water because of the efforts of the whole Charity Water team and our amazing community of generous donors and givers around the world. So that keeps us animated for sure. But it's a full-time job, if anybody was wondering. I get
Not a
can't tell you
part-time 4-hour work week.
tell you how many times I get asked that. Maybe I don't look like a CEO. I don't know. Maybe I look like I work somewhere else. They expect me to work at a club or something. I don't know.
What do you believe that no one else seems to believe?
I have a real abundance mentality when it comes to money. So I believe we'll be getting billion-dollar donations in the future. Single billion-dollar donations. if we continue to execute and if we continue to stay the course. I'm not sure how many people on my team. I'm not sure many people on my team believe that. As we're just closing in on raising $1 billion in total in 16 years.
Well, I mean, like I've heard a pastor say, we don't have a money problem. We have a transfer problem. And sadly, too many people are waiting till the end of their life to be generous. They're waiting till the balance of their life is run out, and then they'll leave what balance is left. And I think that's a shame because you can't make a greater return than giving right now. The
Yeah.
exponentiality of what charity water does when you can give someone clean water. I'd love for you to talk about this. When you can give someone clean water, what that change could happen for one individual that didn't have to walk 8 hours to get water.
Yeah. Real quick. I mean, if you don't have water, everything in your life is massively different. And there are huge health implications. I mentioned, in some of these countries, half the disease is waterborne. There are massive education implications. For example, 1 in 3 schools throughout the world don't have clean water. They don't have toilets. Imagine sending your 13-year-old daughter who just hit puberty to school 4 or 5 days a month, and that school has no water and no toilets. And what you do is you keep your daughter home, and she falls behind in her studies. There's massive implications when it comes to economic activity. If you are walking 8 hours a day for water, you are wasting, 8 times 7, 56 hours a week. That is money that is not selling rice at the market. It's not starting a brick building business. It's not agriculture. It is 56 lost hours, because if you don't walk for water on Saturdays and Sundays, you're going without water for your whole family. So there's economic impacts, education, health, and then women and girls, are at high risk because culturally, I've now been to 72 countries. Culturally, the burden of water always falls to the women and the girls, and they are marginalized beyond belief in these scenarios. The crazy thing is, in many of these communities, the clean water is underground, 20 stories underground. We have a place, a farmhouse, and there's a well drilled in our property, and it was $15,000 to drill a well. So many people I know they are drinking well water, if they're not connected to an urban environment. The difference is, instead of me, my wife, and my kids and the grandparents, it's a village of 250 or 300 people sharing that asset of clean water coming out from the ground. So, I've taken hundreds of people now to Africa and India and Asia. And they'll look at me sometimes when a well is drilled and say, I mean, is it really that simple? Like, were these people living on top of the resource that could have saved their lives, and what they didn't have access to was a drilling machine and $10,000 of capital? And the answer is yes. And we've been able to do that now over 100,000 times. Transfer capital to heavy machinery and release clean water. Now, we fund 14 technologies now, so it's wells and springs and rainwater harvesting systems, and there's really myriad different technologies, but often it's as simple as tapping into that groundwater. There was a story once of in Ethiopia, one of our partners was drilling a well, and the whole community was gathered around the drilling rig, and they were clapping and shouting, and there was this one older woman off to the side weeping. And the head driller goes over and says, "This is a joyful day for your community. Like, what's wrong with you?" And she was distraught, and she said, "What I realized was that I spent my entire life watching people die. And the thing I needed was right here. It was right here all along. It was right underneath my feet." And that was a devastating realization for her. So we don't want that 10-year-old girl right now to walk for the next 50 years. We want that 10-year-old girl to have clean water and to only know clean water that's growing up. And we want her to grow up and be educated and be a future leader in her country.
Absolutely. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up is, we have a responsibility as believers to meet the earthly needs of people before we talk to them about spiritual needs. And I think this is like Jesus talking with the woman in the well. I mean, she had water. And now like he said, you're going to run out of water. But she had her physical needs met. And then he talked to her about spiritual consequences about not having living water. And I think we have definitely a duty and
Hmm.
responsibility to use our finances, our resources, our time to get people their physical needs that they need here on earth and talk to them about their spiritual needs. And I think this has been a really great show to learn more about one way that people are getting their earthly needs met.
Yep. Yep. Love it.
Well, Scott, I want to just wrap up and share with the listeners how can they get more involved over the next few months? Is there any upcoming events in 2023 that they might need to be mindful of? And again, if you'll repeat the website so they
Yeah,
can be
sure.
part of the spring and gift.
Sure. We've got some online campaigns. Look out in March for World Water Day, and then we'll launch a summer campaign, and then probably something around our anniversary in fall. No big galas planned at this moment, but you can learn more at charitywater.org about how you might sponsor a water project. And if you're interested in that monthly giving community, that's thespring.com. There's also on thespring.com, there's a video that's gotten over 100 million views now, which tells the charity water story. And if you wanted just to share that with others, that also helps. If you don't have any money to give, but you say, I might know some people who would be moved by this mission, go to thespring.com, grab that video and help us share it.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Scott, for sharing with us the mission of Charity Water because there's such great causes like yours that really impact literally millions of lives. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was an honor to be able to spend some time with you. And thanks everybody for
Well,
listening.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much again. And I want to thank you for listening to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. One thing that would really help both of us is if you would go on to your podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, and leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star review because it would really help change other people's lives, really change people's lives because they would learn more about Charity Water. They would learn about the charities and the organizations that we highlight here on the Rich, Young, and Powerful show. Be sure to check out our website, richyoungandpowerful.com. You can pick up a copy of my new book, The Giving Crisis, which will share with you my story from greedy to generous. So again, we look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more.